Nope. Guess we'll start on the first slide. All right, hello, welcome all. This is the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund Grant Committee meeting listening session. This meeting is being recorded. You should have all just gotten that notice. I'm gonna go over a few public participation guidelines, then we'll do some introductions, and I'll give a brief update on our public input feedback that we've received to date, and then Sam will go over some ground rules or some guidance about the listening session, and then we'll get started. So this is pretty similar to our typical virtual participation guidelines. The chat box is open for introductions and public comments. This says at all other times that it's host only chat, but actually today we're gonna leave it open so that anyone can access it at any time. We do ask that if folks have something that they want to share, that they do so in the form of public testimony and try to avoid having conversations within the chat box. The raise hand is used by committee members only. Staff will call on members of the public to give testimony. The video also is generally on for committee members only and for staff who are participating in the meeting. But we ask that when you're giving testimony, if you're comfortable putting your video on, you can. We ask that you go ahead and do that. And there's also closed captioning available for this meeting, and you can find that by going up to the little menu bar in your Zoom menu bar and clicking on those 3 buttons, and then it's an option in that drop-down list. So with that, I think that we will get started with introductions. I'm gonna start with committee members, and then we will move to staff. If the members of the public who have joined the meeting could just put your name and if you have an organizational affiliation or if you're interested in indicating your preferred pronouns, if you could put that into the chat box now, that would be great, and we can read those off. Also, if you have not signed up for public comment and you're interested in providing that comment, please indicate your interest when you put your name into the chat box as well. Okay, so let's start with committee introductions, and we will start with Jeffrey.
Jeffrey Moreland, committee member, he, him.
Michael.
Michael Eden Hill, committee member, he, him.
Faith.
Faith Graham, good evening, everyone. Committee member, she, her.
Robin.
Good evening, Robin Wang, he, him, committee member.
Megan.
Hi, Megan Horst, she, her, committee member.
Rainfeast.
Rainfeast, Janitor Viatoro, he, him, committee member.
Andrea.
Andrea Amberg, she, her, committee member.
Maria.
Maria Sippin, she, they, committee member.
Shanice.
Shanice Brittany Clark, committee member, she, they.
Okay, and now we'll move to staff. James.
Everybody, James Valdez, PCEF staff, he, him pronouns.
Janet.
Good evening, Janet Hammer, PCEF staff, she, her pronouns.
Sam.
Sam Brasso, he, him, PCEF staff.
And Wendy.
Wendy Kelfkin, BPS staff, supporting PCEF, she, her.
Wing.
Wing Grabowski, he, him, BPS staff.
And I am Katie Lister, BPS, or I'm not BPS, I'm BPS and PCEF staff, and I use she, her pronouns. Sam, would you mind reading off the introductions from the chat box?
Absolutely. All right. We've got with us this evening Anissa Pemberton from the PCEF Coalition, they, them. We've got Angela Carly Cook, she, her, from the Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association. We've got Jeremy Simmer, SEIU Local 49, he, him. We've got Charity Fain, Community Energy Project, she, her. We've got Steve Achilles, Exceed Enterprises, he, him. We've got Paul Philpott, Carpenters Union, he, him. We've got Suzanne Vadri Casas. Apologies if I got that wrong. She, her from PCRI. We've got DJ Schutz, Nutrition Garden RX. She, her. Jay Ward, Energy Trust of Oregon. He, him. Lynn Lindgren Schroeder, Housing Development Center. She, her. Three Tui, Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. She, her. Lily Brown, Sabin CDC. She, her. Jenny Hall, Energy Trust of Oregon. She, her.
All right, thank you. Just a couple of items before I turn it over to Sam. One of our committee members, Robin, asked if he could say a few words before we hear public testimony. So I'd like to allow him to do that. But first, did also want to ask other committee members if there were any items that they felt needed to be added to the agenda today, if time allows, after public comments. Okay. All right. Well then, Robin, I'd like to turn it over to you, and then we'll move on to giving an update and then giving introductions and getting going.
Sure, and I'll keep this quick. I think, a lot has happened in the last few weeks since we put out the grant review process up for public comment. And as I kind of reflect and react to some of the recent events, part of me is thinking that we didn't do enough in designing this process, that there's more that we could have done to make these funds more accessible to the frontline communities in addressing environmental, social, climate justice, especially in the context of COVID, which none of us anticipated this would happen with PCEF. And so, as folks and organizations share with us, their feedback, whether it's tonight or online, I want to first thank everybody for taking the time to review the materials. And I know there was a lot of materials out there and offering, feedback in your comments. But I think more importantly is, and I think I can speak for many on the PCEF team, is don't hold back your comments. We really want to know how we can do a better job, doing this. We're doing some kind of groundbreaking work here, and that means, we don't always know where we're going. And, because PCEF is largely a community-driven initiative, I want to thank everybody again, and I really, look forward to hearing your comments, and, please share freely with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Freely but kindly. So I'm just going to give a quick update on Megan Horst. One of our committee members asked for a sort of a status update on who and how many folks we had kind of been able to connect with so far. So I just wanted to give that real quick. In terms of one-on-one meetings, we've directly reached out to 42 community-based organizations with a focus on those that are led by and provide services to Black and Indigenous people. We've had 9 of those meetings, 8 with organizations that are led by and focused on Black and Indigenous people, 4 more scheduled for this week. 13 of those were nonprofits and 1 was a trade union. We've received 6 email comments via email or feedback via email. Of those 6, 2 were from businesses, 2 from nonprofits, 1 from a training program, and 1 from just an individual member of the public. We've had 3 webinars with a total of 79 participants. The PCEF Coalition co-hosted a webinar with staff that 9 folks participated in. The Coalition of Communities of Color also co-hosted a webinar with PCEF staff that 12 people participated in. And so far we've received 28 survey responses. So that's, if you add all of those up, it's about 148, though there are duplicates and we haven't had an opportunity to go through and kind of remove those duplicates. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sam to kind of set some ground rules and give some guidance before we open up for public testimony.
And only because I think the opportunity may have been missed, Katie. I'm going to just bring up the point again earlier that you raised to committee members. Did any committee member want to add any additional agenda items for the period after the public comment period?
Sam, were we going to get an update on recruitment?
I can provide a quick update. I can provide a quick update on the back end of the agenda. Mm-hmm.
Shanice?
Francis?
That was going to be the same thing. Thank you.
Renfis?
I think, yeah, just wanted to bring in an agenda item related to an incident in a construction site that I wanted to raise for our committee members to discuss about related to a noose being hung at a public construction project. So I wanted to at least get this sort of discussion within the committee.
All right. Thank you. Sam?
Okay. Thank you. So as we get into our public listening session this evening, I just want to share a little bit and set just a little context. You know, PCEF is for and by the community. And as we've developed the program, it has been critical that our communities, particularly our Black and Indigenous communities, see themselves in PCEF. So we've created a variety of pathways for folks to provide feedback on the draft application and criteria to meet our needs. This includes the online survey, webinars, one-on-one outreach, and comments via the PCEF email and phone line. Tonight's listening session provides an additional pathway for folks to weigh in because we know that for many, speaking directly to the committee is important. That said, it's important to know that at the end of this public comment period, we'll be combining that feedback with other feedback we've received from all input pathways, including tonight's listening session, sharing those findings. No particular way of providing feedback is better than another. So folks will be called on tonight to share their feedback on the draft application scoring criteria, and we'll have about 7 minutes to do so. Unless you have so many, 7 minutes so far is what we're budgeting to do so. And I will provide a 1 minute sort of remaining indicator and then a time remaining when we get to that point so you all can see that. But specific suggestions for how to improve the process and program are welcome and encouraged. It's important to remember that this is a listening session rather than a work session. In order to keep consistency across the feedback we're receiving, the committee is primarily going to be asking clarifying questions if your testimony is unclear. So if the committee's quiet, know that they're listening and we're taking in that feedback. General conversations will not really be occurring within the committee with members of the public tonight. But if there are questions from folks providing testimony, staff will be taking note of those particular questions and following up with you afterwards. Please share your contact information directly with us if you don't have it, and you can do so just by chatting us directly and sharing your contact information with any PCEF staff. So with that, I just want to pause and see if any committee members have any questions about how we're gonna move through this listening session. Okay.
Before we get going, I just like to, because we did have a few folks join a few minutes late, and I just wanted to make sure that they knew that they had the opportunity to sign up for public comment by just indicating their interest in the chat box. And if they also want to just kind of put their name and their affiliation and gender pronouns, if they're interested in there as kind of a way of introduction, that would be great. I think we had 5 or 6 joined a little bit late.
Yeah, and maybe Katie, to add to that, I realized there's actually one person dialing in with the last 4 digits 5715.
Okay.
And so if that individual is calling in to provide public comment, maybe I'm just wondering if we just unmute them and
Yeah.
check in.
James, can you unmute the phone line?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that. And it is unmuted.
Hi, for the person who dialed in, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, this is Micah, Micah Meskel, Portland Audubon, he, him pronouns, and I am just listening along with others today.
Okay. Thank you. All right, well, the first person that we have signed up for public, is that it, Sam? Anything else? Okay, so the first person that we have signed up for public comment today is Jeremy Seimer. Jeremy, if you could make yourself visible and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, hi, hello everyone. My name is Jeremy Simmer. I'm standing in for Yasmin Ibarra, who planned on sharing these comments, but she's out due to a family emergency. We work for SEIU Local 49, which is a union of about 15,000 workers in Oregon and Southwest Washington. including thousands of janitors who clean commercial buildings, City of Portland properties, and other public and private facilities. First of all, we want to express our deep appreciation for the visionary and transformative work that you're doing, implementing PCEF's vision for climate justice, centering the leadership and participation of people of color and other marginalized communities. We think that includes janitors, who are largely people of color, women, immigrants, and people with disabilities who often live in the under-resourced neighborhoods of our city. We've looked carefully at the materials you circulated, and sorry, I lost track of my notes. And we think that you've put together a set of guidelines that are thoughtful, detailed, transparent, and really great work. One thing that we hope that the guidelines and evaluations process will take into account is proposals' potential for system change to transform existing industries and facilities to create climate justice. Now, what do we mean by that? Just want to talk a little bit about our organization and what we're trying to do. For decades, our members have fought for successfully job quality standards in a largely exploitative industry. They've won, pay above $15 an hour, excellent healthcare benefits, a retirement pension, paid time off, solutions for stopping gender-based violence at the workplace, and other standards that foster respect. Now, members of Local 49, SEIU, are ready to step up and push forward the work of climate justice in commercial real estate. As you know, buildings are the single largest contributor to carbon emissions in Multnomah County, representing 40% of the total, according to research we found related to the Climate Action Plan. And we're getting ready to launch what's called the Green Janitorial Education Program in Oregon, because our members are frontline workers who are really well positioned to reduce energy usage and greenhouse gas emissions in large buildings, and to do so in a cost-effective manner. This Green Janitor Education Program has trained more than 1,000 janitors in California in hundreds of buildings covering more than 20 million square feet of office space since 2014. And we're bringing this program to Portland. We were planning on launching it this spring. Our pilot was due to go live, I think, in March or April, but some things have been going on. And the program is to teach janitors the fundamentals of green building maintenance, including techniques to reduce energy usage, water usage, maximize recycling, and other things. It uses a 30-hour curriculum that is approved by the U.S. Green Building Council, and janitors train during work hours, so to ensure that they're paid fairly for their participation. So I mention this because this project may be a little bit different than some of the other projects that may apply for PCEF funding. And we wanted to highlight that we see it as being a model for transforming the operations of large office buildings that already exist and which are significant carbon emitters. Our objectives are to leverage the relationships we've been developing for decades with building owners and with janitorial contractors to reduce carbon emissions in this sector and to make this industry more economically just for frontline workers. So we hope that this concept of systems change potential is something that is considered as part of the PCEF's evaluation of proposals. In looking at the materials, we didn't find any specific place to recommend any edits, because it's a great document, but we wanted to name this concept. So we're very excited about the RFP you're preparing to release, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves and work with you and other partners for climate justice. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any clarifying questions from the committee? All right, the next person signed up to give testimony is Charity Fain.
Hi.
There you are.
Yeah, just had to get it all set up.
And let's tell who's next up, Katie, just so they can be ready.
Oh, okay. Anissa is after Charity.
Sorry, trying to get my comments here, and I'm having a little trouble. my laptop. Here we go. So yeah, I'm Charity Fain, Executive Director at the Community Energy Project. And I also want to thank everyone first and just recognize the work that you've put into this in a really short time period, which would have been hard work in a normal situation and incredibly hard in the situations that we're all in right now. So I just want to recognize that and thank you for for the work that you've put in to developing this system and this program. And I also want to thank you all for listening tonight and extending these opportunities for us to give comments in person. Tonight, I'm going to limit my remarks to the criteria for large grants. And I will be submitting and writing a detailed feedback on each criteria. So I'm not going to go over every criteria in my comments. I want to kind of talk about a few higher level issues. For those of you who don't know, CEP has worked with low-income communities providing weatherization services for over 40 years. And in that time, we know that this work has often been misunderstood or undervalued. And as such, it's chronically underfunded. And PCEF is bringing needed funding to frontline communities who have too long been denied access, as we know, and we all hope for. And I have to say, I was really excited to get a hold of the scoring criteria and to see where, you know, the rubber's going to hit the road. And I have to be really honest, the first time I read this criteria, I felt something in my heart break a little bit. And that's because it's actually really a complicated system. And I see that it's putting up a lot of barriers to participation that are being built into the scoring system for the nonprofits that will be applying. And I think those barriers are going to make it very difficult and take an enormous amount of time just to write the proposal. And that's also going to make these programs difficult to implement. So tonight, I'm actually asking you to go back and overhaul the criteria to simplify the application process and to eliminate the barriers that I think are being built into the system. For example, just a couple of examples. Again, I don't want to go into detail on every criteria. I will provide that in writing. But you've asked over and over again for us to submit detailed plans to prove past practices or proposed practices. And I just ask that you remember, this is a proposal. It's not the grant agreement or a contract where you tend to more often have the detailed plans listed. Asking us to write detailed plans for a grant that many of us will never receive isn't really a standard practice in proposals. Then under the capacity building section, you know, for the last year we were meeting pretty regularly to talk about capacity building. So I felt most passionate about commenting on the capacity building session because I really questioned what your understanding of nonprofit management and financial systems are based on the questions that you're asking. I think that the questions, the criteria set forth will really allow only large established nonprofits to score high. That you've assumed a level of sophistication that most groups do not have because we're working in sectors that are underfunded and underfunded around administrative functions. Like we often usually have grants that cap that. So we don't necessarily have a lot of the HR and financial systems that you're asking us to prove. And this will really only reinforce the status quo that we already have. So I'm really worried about what groups can score high in this section. So many of us here have applied for all kinds of RFPs with various scoring systems. And though honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen one as complicated as this one. And in those scoring systems, we all know that there are assumptions kind of baked into them, and that you as the drafter of your proposal really work to maximize scoring in each area and hope that you'll be competitive. So when I looked at these criteria, it says to me that you've decided that you want to fund really kind of certain types of programs based on who's going to score high on the criteria. And that would be an established nonprofit with a robust HR and finance department that does a certain type of community outreach and is planning to do large single site projects with many workers that will receive the minimum salary. That, if you just go through the numbers, is how you would score the highest in this criteria. And it would take a lot of work actually to do that, because there are a lot. And again, you're asking for details all over. So I just had to ask, is this by design? Is this really, you've decided that these are the types of programs that you want to fund? Or is this an unintended consequence? And I get that for some RFPs, that is exactly by design. That is what they do, because it might be that it's an RFP for a single contract to run a program that was designed by the funding body. But PCEF is just to remember, PCEF is a grant program. It is not going to award a single contract. There will be many different types of programs proposed that were rooted in community and designed by the nonprofits. And they will come in all shapes and sizes, and that would still be in a large grant category. And so I'm going to ask that you really take a hard look at where you can simplify the scoring system that allows for diversity of types of projects and doesn't benefit one type of project or size of organization over others. So my ask to you really is to simplify this process. I think you need to even eliminate some of the categories. Don't require so many detailed plans for a proposal. I get in a grant contract you might. Allow for more flexibility in the types of programs proposed, and trust the nonprofits who already do this work, even if that means they need to build capacity in order to do more. So those are the main points I wanted to get by tonight. And again, I will submit more information in writing. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk tonight.
I was muted. Thank you, Charity. Any clarifying questions from the committee? All right, next up is Anissa, and then following Anissa will be Stephen Achilles. Anissa? Oh, sorry, Ranfis, it looks like you have a question.
Sorry, I was trying to find the button to raise my hand. I thought I'd get it down by now. Charity, just had a follow-up question. Were there specific questions on the application that you felt weren't asked in other applications? And is there anything, I know you'll send us a detailed plan, but is there anything at the top of your list that you thought makes this really a barrier for smaller organizations to apply for PCEF?
Fortunately, there were several. And I think it goes back to some of the assumptions on the capacity that you want us to prove in advance. So some of the financial questions around how nonprofits are scored financially, and like, you know, whether you're able to understand a nonprofit 990 to be able to understand that we're not like a profit and loss way that a business is. I think some of the questions on saying that you have to prove you've already had grants of this size. Well, maybe there was never funding opportunity before PCEF. So, or, you know, systematic racism in the system has meant a group has never been able to get a grant of that size. So there, it was, for me, too much based on what is already there to prove that you're eligible to get these funds, when we know the system that has given out resources already there hasn't been fair. So you're going to reward groups that already play the system well and already know how to do this and already get money. And that's my biggest concern when I read this system, this criteria.
Well, thanks for your testimony and thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that, and look forward to your comments. And I think just want to sort of convey, we hope that this is accessible to as many organizations as possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charity. Anissa?
Hi, everyone. First, I want to say thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to this process and your willingness to continue to engage with the community so collectively we can launch the PCEF program in the most equitable way possible. I know that this process has been less than ideal for volunteer committee members. I recognize that not only has there been a limited time period, there's also been a lot of racial justice organizing with the Black Lives Matter movement. There's been the ongoing health and economic crisis. And then, of course, this is also a unique and brand new program that everyone is trying to get their heads around. And I can tell that there's been a tricky balance being held by you all. This document is clearly a labor of love, and the attention to detail that I see, I very much appreciate. I wanted to be more descriptive and specific tonight about the changes that the PCEF Coalition suggests need to be made. However, I'm still very much trying to gather community input from the coalition, and so I wanted to share with you more details when I had more voices at the table. I will say, and mostly I'm speaking, I'll try to be as clear as possible about when I'm speaking for myself and when I'm speaking for the coalition. So for myself personally, I've been a grant writer since I started in the nonprofit sector. And I will be honest, I struggled with digesting the current criteria, and I've struggled with describing it to my community members and trying to help people navigate it. Broadly speaking, I am hearing a general consensus that the PCEF Coalition is concerned about the burden of proof that is currently written into the grant program. We have heard from many small BIPOC community-led organizations that they feel a little discouraged from applying by looking into the application materials, which, I think we all consider to be concerning. I know that I trust you as committee members, and I sort of echo Charity's voice of we believe that this program should be designed from trust. And so I know that you all have grounding in the community to do that. I wanted to mention that today at the PCEF Coalition meeting, folks agreed that we all wanted to make sure that the program is launched correctly and equitably. And I know we share those values. If the grant committee decides that you need a longer period of time to integrate suggestions and comments than the current proposed timeline, we would support pushing back the launch date. I want to be clear, though, this is based on your discretion, on what your capacity is, on what you feel like you can handle. So it's not us saying you need to do that, but just saying if that ends up being the case, we would support that. Finally, I'd like to note that the way the program is perceived in the community is as important as the structure of the program itself. If organizations feel like the process is too burdensome to apply, then the program will eventually earn an inaccessible reputation in the community. And I know that we are all united in our shared goals of ensuring that that is not the outcome that we have from this process. Anyways, thank you again. I'm looking forward to discussing our feedback in more detail. If you are curious or you have questions about our feedback, you can expect more detailed suggestions based on the various grant options and the current questions. We're basically going to be writing a letter, and we'll be breaking up different pages on different sections so that we can have precise feedback for you. I wish that I had more information today, but I assure you all I'm working very hard to try to get that for you all. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anissa. Any clarifying questions? Just wanted to note again that if folks are interested in signing up for public comment, they can do so via the chat box. We have Stephen Achilles up next, followed by Suzanne Beaudry-Casas. Steve?
Thank you, Katie. So again, thank you very much for your work. We have probably come a little bit later to the table here, as we've really learned about this a couple of months ago. So I'm with Exceed Enterprises. We work with individuals of diverse abilities And so I've got four things that I'd like to say. The first is around the issue of living wage. We acknowledge and appreciate the commitment to a living wage. It is absolutely the right thing to do. However, please understand that this is a significant limiter for individuals who rely on SSDI to participate in the program. And since part of the focus is on people with disabilities, we are requesting in the long term, and I want to be very clear about this, not in the short term, but in the long term, you give thought, and we are certainly happy to participate in discussions around how to create a more inclusive work source by addressing issues that individuals that rely on SSDI for their healthcare needs in particular to address. So we make that request. A couple of other items that I'd like to share really in the form of a question. There's a particular focus on the area east of 82nd Avenue, which is really important, given the challenge of that part of Multnomah County. And we are, while we recognize this is a Portland initiative, that bleeds into Rockwood, which is an area of great diversity, but also has great challenges. So there may be nothing that can be done there, but I do ask that you take that into consideration. And the next two items are related, and they may run a little bit counter to charity. We agree that, please make it simple. However, personally, I've spent many, many years leading large energy efficiency programs. And you've got information in here about calculating greenhouse gas emissions. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of assumptions. If there is a model that you are going to rely on, that might be helpful to share to make it easier for everybody to do some of those calculations. And if those models could be available, that would be helpful, because I have seen on multiple occasions, different engineers come to very different conclusions for the same project. A similar topic is around the energy efficiency projects. That is an important part of, we see as our role in the future here in terms of creating jobs. And these projects traditionally have been very limited by the requirements for payback. So if, for instance, if a project has an economic payback of less than 1 year, we're not going to fund it. I haven't seen in the document this particular issue addressed, but it is an issue that I hope you will not take the same path as utilities and the Energy Trust typically take. I understand why they take it, but what that has done in years of work, and in work, frankly, that I've done, has limited projects for smaller organizations and for organizations that face the challenges that come with being a person of color and and working in certain neighborhoods. So it is my hope that as you try to screen these projects and you look at how emissions are calculated, what projects are good, that you not take the path that utilities have taken and say that we won't do short payback projects because they have a very devastating impact on communities that aren't wealthy, simply put, because those projects just don't get done historically. And it's one of the reasons why we're here today, because the very projects, many of the projects that will be proposed were probably proposed in years past, but shot down for reasons of economic payback. So I hope that you will take that into consideration in the calculations. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any clarifying questions from committee? Robin?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a wage expert, so can you help me understand? I didn't fully understand. Can you help me understand the challenge between living wages and social SSDI, Social Security disability income? I presume. I'm not seeing the conflict there or the issue.
Certainly, and it's an unfortunate one. And hopefully we can, in the years to come, change the system so this does not become an issue. But individuals who have spent their lives, or a good portion of their lives, on SSDI have a structure, including their health care, that's built on that. If they make too much money, And we have clients now who have been promoted, have gotten great jobs, and all of a sudden, if they work 40 hours a week, the government will take away their SSDI. If this individual does not have family support, as a for instance, and they lose their job, they'll lose their health care. And many individuals are not willing to put that at risk because the only world that they've known is that world. And important part of our company is to help break that cycle. But right now you can't break it because of the way the rules are set up.
Thank you, Steve. Rand, please.
I guess I have two questions, and I guess I can leave the first question for maybe a separate conversation. Just was more curious about the last comment you made about payback, but I guess the question on the healthcare component. I think I guess I don't want to assume the solution here, but in a proposal that includes healthcare benefits being factored into a grant application, is that a false solution? It sounds like there's a systemic change on SSDI, but if there was a grant proposal that included healthcare benefits for members, that makes it a competitive application, does that address the issue?
Not really. Let's say we put in, for an example, a 12-month grant. The individual would then face concern, what happened if that grant's not renewed and I lose my job? Now I have to go through a process that could take months, and I might get rejected before I could get back onto SSDI and get benefits. And we literally have a couple of clients we're doing with us now. They've kept jobs through the pandemic. They've been promoted. And now they're like, I don't want to work 40 hours a week, so I don't want to run the risk of getting fired, losing my benefits, and being in a health pandemic and having no benefits in 6 months. So there's a culture that's built around the structure that is a difficult thing to change, which is why I would never ask that you change it in the short run. But how can we in the long run help to build a structure to get around this would be a conversation we would like to have.
Thank you, Steve. All right, so we have Suzanne up next, followed by Alan Hippolito, and then Angela Crowley-Cook. Suzanne?
Hi. Yeah, good evening. So my name is Suzanne Beaudry-Casals, and I work at PCRI. I also want to thank you guys for all the work you're doing. I think the potential this program has to truly make change in our community is remarkable. The comments I'm going to give, I also have written some comments that I will be sending in where I've broken everything up. My notes are quite extensive on this stuff. But I did want to give some sort of overview of one of the major issues that I have with this program. So first, a little bit of background. PCRI is a culturally specific African-American run organization that has been doing work in low-income housing and asset building and development in North and Northeast Portland for 25 plus years. This is an organization that I have been working with for 4 years. I think that we are at a remarkable time right now where we're actually starting to see not just individuals, but actual institutions, corporations coming forward and saying, now is the time to dismantle systemic racism. And Robin, you asked us to be real blunt here. I want to be kind, but quite honestly, the way this criteria is written does not dismantle systemic racism. In fact, in many ways, it actually makes it worse. Maybe I could give you a little example of that. So at PCRI, we do not get a lot of grant funds. We try, we don't have a grant writer. Our capacity is somewhat limited. But we try. And the people who are writing it are not professional grant writers. And so we often fail. In fact, we almost always fail. Sometimes we'll have people come back to us and say, well, gosh, if you used this wording, maybe you would have gotten the grant, but So it's really, it feels very academic. this particular paper feels like there's lingo in it, that maybe there's somebody that knows what this means, but for my organization, it's not particularly clear. We have had some success at getting some funding from the state in a program where they had a grant that they put out that was 10-page maximum. That's all you could submit, was 10 pages. And we did it and we were successful. Yay, great, fabulous. But there's also a program out there that the state does called LIFT. LIFT is done for development. My organization does major developments. We have major apartment complexes that we've built, we have homes that we've built, but we will not apply for this stuff because it is way too complicated. Like way more than we could possibly do, especially considering we don't actually have somebody on staff that is doing this type of work. There are some things in this that make me feel like this is a document that was written for white people. For instance, it feels like this is, you have to justify, if you're a white organization, how to get this funding. You have to prove that you have a mission and that your information that you're providing in a mission or maybe an equity statement is actually integrated into your organization. And quite honestly, this is not something that, one, we feel pretty comfortable sharing with you guys. Like, for instance, you asked under the organizational capacity piece, we would like to see documentations that include policies, procedures, planning documents, recruitment planning, training offered and required, surveys of staff, and description of practices. It's like, that sounds like the white organization I used to work for that had a whole bunch of money to do that kind of work. Right now, this would be really overwhelming for us. And we've had bad experiences in the past where we have shared these types of documents and then they've showed up as city programs that, one, we didn't get any kind of credit for, and two, they got it messed up and now there are issues with that. So I'm kind of saying right now it really feels like it's written so that those large white organizations have a way to prove that they truly are doing work in the community. Where for us, it feels like we've been doing this work. This is what we do for 25 years. You know, the vast majority of the people we work with, 90% of our clients, the vast majority of our staff, of our board are all African American. And we have to kind of prove to you that that's who we are. I mean, it feels uncomfortable. And then the other piece about this is there is a fear that this organization has, that my organization has, that's just now sort of coming to the forefront. So like you're asking, do you serve African-American people? And yeah, that's what we do, but we don't necessarily write that in our mission statement. We'll say low-income people because that's a nuance for who we work for. Because if we were to say, yeah, we work with Black people, the next thing you know, we're gonna have white organizations coming to us and go, well, that's reverse racism. And so historically, there have been reasons that the organization is fearful of providing the type of documentation that you're asking for. And I feel like this is just way too much proposal for somebody that has the capacity of a PCRI. That's it.
I gotta stop muting myself. Thank you, Suzanne. Are there any clarifying questions from the committee? Rangfeast? Clarifying.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if any of the folks have questions. I don't want to take up too much space. I guess we'd love to know what types of
don't have nothing.
Sorry, what types of applications PCRI typically applies for that PCEF as a committee could look at?
What type in the past that we've applied for other organizations?
Or sorry, what are models? And I recalled you mentioned a program from the state that you thought was accessible. I was wondering if you can name that and if there are any other grant structures that you thought would be useful for us as a committee to review.
Yeah, OHCS, Oregon, this is the housing organization. OHCS has a program called the HOPE, H-O-A-P program that offers down payment assistance the program that they just did ask questions about equity, and we did, tell them all kinds of information about what we do and what we've done in the past, but it doesn't ask you to prove through, SOPs, exactly what it is that you do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. So next up, we have Alan Hippolito, followed by Angela Crowley-Cook.
Hi, folks. Good to be in community with you this evening. This is Alan Hippolito from Verde and its SUMA program. I use he, him pronouns. I want to echo all the gratitude and support for this historic and moral mission that you're on and the great work that you're doing in the most challenging of circumstances. And I'm also going to echo what I think you've heard from Charity, from Anissa and others, working closely with Anissa and other coalition, PCEF coalition members to provide more detailed comments. But overarching, I really want to reinforce Charity's recommendation that you invest in some kind of, whether it's an external or review or an internal review, with an eye towards really stripping this application down to its most basic components and questions, and towards simplifying the language. Like the applicants, for example, give yourself a page limit and a word limit, and try to get the most fundamental portions within those limits. I'm concerned about the accessibility of the language. There's a lot of content here that is, I think I would find difficult to complete. And, one of our coalition members made a strong point today that the complexity where it is right now means that the least complex is the planning grant opportunity. And that may drive groups, if we stay where we are, it may drive groups, frontline organizations who are concerned about their capacity to answer the more challenging, more complex questions in the large grant or small grant, to choose the planning option, even though maybe they have a pretty good idea of what they want to do and could actually get it done within a 12-month period after award. But instead, they feel safer in the planning category. And if that happens, we could unfortunately end up with a lot of projects being planned in the first year and fewer projects actually on the ground, planting trees, building community gardens, installing solar arrays. So again, I really urge you to basically attack your creation, right, and strip it down to its most fundamental parts with an eye towards the accessibility of the length, the language itself, and the forms that you're asking folks to complete. And again, we'll be working closely with Anissa and the rest of the coalition to provide some additional detail here. So, be pushing this rock up a hill for a while, almost there, definitely almost there, but it's time to take a scalpel because the full sculpture hasn't come out of the rock yet. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Any clarifying questions from committee members?
Yes, can I say something? This is Shannon Olive. I'm
Shannon, are you, Shannon, if you're a member of the public and you're interested in providing testimony, can we add you, can we have you wait until right after Angela?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Angela, go ahead.
We've got, I think Michael had a question there, Katie, real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, Angela.
Hey, I just wanted to see if I got what you were saying, Alan, that we need to strip it down to the point where planning grants shouldn't be necessary.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that overall, the application's complexity means that the least complicated opportunity is for a planning grant. And I would argue that a planning grant is still too complicated. But if you don't change that, then I think some organizations are just going to say, well, the easiest one to apply for is the planning grant. So I'm going to apply for that, even though I might have a good project that I could get done in the next 12 months. And so you're going to end up basically, I don't know, scaring is the wrong word, but I'm going to use it, scaring folks into applying for planning grants, which is going to limit the amount of work you get done on the ground. So I think the whole thing needs to be simplified, including the planning grants, but if the whole thing is not simplified, I think you're going to see more planning grants than would necessarily be good.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
All right. Any other clarifying questions for Alan? Okay, Angela, go ahead.
Thanks. This is Angela Crowley-Cook with Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association, OCI. I use she, her pronouns. And I also want to echo gratitude toward all the committee members. This is such a Herculean task. So thank you for all your work. And then I'll also echo the comments of Alan and Charity and others about how burdensome I think this application process is going to be. However, I want to temper that by also stating that I have a worry about PCEF that maybe not in the initial years, but in the out years, that there could potentially be bad actors that want to take advantage of a new funding opportunity. Unfortunately, we've seen that in Oregon before with the business energy tax credit. And this program is such a good program and can be such a shining model for the entire country that I really want to ensure that we don't have bad actors participating. And so it's a balancing act. We need to make sure the applications aren't too burdensome, but I was also uncomfortable with language about trusting applicants because if, there will be applicants that aren't known to the community, that haven't been around in Portland for a long time. And so I really want to impress upon the committee to make sure that we're protecting this program and we're protecting these taxpayer dollars against any potential bad actors. And so it is a fine line to walk between being burdensome on the one side and having too much trust and letting bad actors sneak in. So thank you for all your efforts into walking that balance and making sure that these dollars go towards their intended purpose and for groups that are here to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Any clarifying questions from committee members? Okay, we're gonna, Shannon, would you like to provide your testimony now?
I would like to say that my name is Shannon Olive, and I am the founder and president for Women's First Transition and Referral Center. We work to serve women transitioning from prison, women in recovery, women that's recovering from trauma. We are a culture-specific organization. We just are been operating for about 3 years as of March of this year. And I just wanted to, I've been actually working alongside, met a couple times with Sam and James in a couple meetings and learned a little bit about this initiative and actually voted to put on the ballot. And just, I wanted to piggyback on what, forgot her name from PCRI and what she talked about, and how as a new women's organization, we are very small, but we're very mighty. And about the, how the process of writing grants, we don't have a grant writer. I'm just actually the grant writer within our organization, how it is very challenging when I write grants, and how we get denied on grants because I am not a well-experienced grant writer, and the challenge of the different complications of the burdens. And so my ask to you all, I don't know who all the committee members are, A lot of times committee members are not people of lived experience.
You're breaking up just a little bit, Shannon. We may have lost the last part of what you said.
A lot of the committee members are not people of lived experience. They're just people that are on the committee who are looking to make decisions to help the community. So a lot of times they don't understand what the people that are being impacted have been through, the struggles that they have been through. So my most definitely argument would be having more people of those lived experience to be at those tables. So when decisions are made, that it makes it more of a balance for people to be able to make the decisions and make the fundings to be balanced out so that everybody can be able to get the funding can be balanced. But my other point that I would like to bring up is when I came on to the meeting about the scoring, I don't know when the applications who are going to when the applications are received, if the committee members are not going to have clarity, will there be opportunities for follow-up questions for you guys to get more clarity of what those answers are on those applications before you make the final decisions on the applications? That's one of the things that I have experienced writing grants, is that sometimes the decisions are made because of the fact that there's numerous of people who are applying for application or a grant, and sometimes that clarifying question doesn't get sent out to the applicant to clarify those questions. The second thing that I wanted to say is I most definitely would piggyback off of Angela as well. Please don't make this a complicated process for people. There's many of organizations who are out there doing amazing work in our community. I understand when the initiative was popped off, is specifically for low-income communities of color. 1% of that dollar, 1% or a penny or whatever it was specifically for low income. So the people that are doing amazing work, helping to make impacts for those communities, it should most definitely not be a burden for those communities to be able to have access or apply for this grant. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that when we talk about as the trust thing that Angela was talking about, yeah, there are going to be a lot of people that when we talk about the trust, that's on the committee and even the folks in the community, but it's also under the discretion of looking at who's applying and knowing. So when we have the committee members, when the funding gets funded to whoever the grants that get funded, I would encourage the people that are on the committees, it should be a quarterly meeting that you go out and meet the people, the organizations who was awarded the grants, to get out and get to meet those organizations and get to know about those organizations, engage, get educated more on those organizations so that you too can also, not that we was able to make the decision to get to fund those organizations, but now we know about those organizations. We know what those organizations do. We know their mission. We know who they serve. Learn about who they are, get educated, get engaged, and get empowered. So when you come back to your meetings, you can talk a little bit more about, because you was now educated, because you participated in an activity, an event, you was able to engage, help out with food boxes, did something to know exactly more about that organization that you were able to award that grant to. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Any clarifying questions from the committee? Okay, well, it looks like that concludes the listening session portion of the meeting. It is 7:05 now. We did have committee members did request a couple of things be put on the end of the agenda. if everyone feels comfortable going for a few minutes longer, I think that we can get a recruitment update from Sam and then ask Granfeast to speak a little bit to the job site incident that he referenced earlier. Does that feel okay for everyone to hang on for a few more minutes? Okay. Sam?
Okay. Recruitment update is really brief. The recruitment subcommittee, which is Megan, Michael, and Maria, met met the first time to talk broadly about how we were going to go about the evaluation process itself, received the applications from the 4 members, and we will get to you all soon enough in that, and met a second time with Laura, John, as well as a couple members of the Indigenous community to talk and get a little bit better perspective on things they should think about as part of the evaluation. I'm going to be working the schedule. I dropped the ball on not scheduling something with enough notice. So I'll be scheduling our follow-up meeting next week with the committee in order to have our subsequent meeting. But we've got a couple more meetings to go before we can get to a place where we think it'll be some sort of discussion or recommendation for a discussion with the broader committee.
Any questions? Thanks, Sam. Granfeast?
Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for putting me on the agenda. I wanted to bring forth an item that's I think, very sensitive topic, and just want to warn folks it is, I think, can be pretty triggering for some folks here on this call. But I wanted to raise awareness of a job site incident in a public project where some of the public owners include the City of Portland, PSU, OHSU, and I might be forgetting another public owner involved in the project. So there's a letter that I'd like to read if there's time. And I don't know if there's questions, but I would like to ask if there's any specific action items that maybe perhaps we as a committee can do. But I think it highlights a challenge in that we're facing here in our country and in the construction industry, and how we make sure that every work site is inclusive for everyone. So I thought maybe I'd read the letter out loud just to give everyone here on the call some context, and I will pull it up. And so this was brought forth by Oregon tradeswomen and other community organizations and labor organizations, and it's now public news, so I'll also read who it's addressed to. So I'll start here. It says, Mr. Joel Anderson, we write today on behalf of industry and community stakeholders who are committed to ensuring that our region's construction job sites and workers are safe. We ask you to consider safety from a perspective of health, wellness, and industry safety, but also from a perspective of harassment, discrimination, and bullying. Women and people of color remain underrepresented in our industry and are frequent targets of harassment and discrimination and bullying. As our community and our nation are confronted with ugly truths and daily instances of misogyny and racism perpetrated against women and people of color, we can no longer ignore harassment, bigotry, and violence in our industry and our job sites. On May 20th, 2020, a noose was hung on the PSU, OHSU, PCC, and City of Portland project in downtown Portland, Oregon. Upon finding this grotesque symbol of racism, hatred, and violence, a female apprentice of color immediately reported it to her company foreman at TCM Corp, a subcontractor to Anderson. The TCM foreman responded that it was probably a joke and did nothing further. The apprentice then went to an Anderson foreman who indicated he would address it at a foreman's meeting, but later indicated to the apprentice that he had forgotten about it. The apprentice took it upon herself to remove the noose. Neither of these responses from job site supervision at the subcontractor and GC level is acceptable. GC's general contractor. We can no longer stand by and excuse such behaviors in this way, for if we do, we are complicit. As an organization whose mission is rooted in addressing the disparity that women experience in our industry, Oregon Tradeswomen acknowledges that at the intersection of race and gender, our Black and Brown trade sisters are at further risk each and every day as they experience not only sexism, but also racism. Not only are the barriers higher for them to overcome, but the stakes are higher as well for their very well-being and for their very lives. We ask that Anderson Construction take the following steps to demonstrate an authentic commitment to address the May 20th incident, but also the institutional norms of our industry, which allow and encourage racism and misogyny to continue on our job sites. 1, share the outcomes in the investigation conducted at the job site pertaining to the incident of May 20th, 2020 with our industry and community leadership. 2, provide an update on actions taken to date in following up and addressing the incident to the members who were on site on May 20th. 3, implement a zero tolerance anti-bias policy on all Anderson job sites with subcontractor accountability. 4, develop and implement protocol for responding to future incidents, which should include but not limited to immediate investigation launch, job site-wide safety meeting accountability of all subcontractors, prevention of retaliation of whistleblowers, and other measures that will help eradicate a culture of oppression, fear, violence, and bullying. 5, secure external anti-racism, anti-bias training from a qualified training provider for frontline supervisor staff at Anderson and all subcontractors. 6, communicate to all staff, trades, workers, vendors, subcontractors, and others associated with the job site the zero tolerance policy and consequences for noncompliance. 7, immediate training for the foreman for both TCM and Anderson who neglected to immediately address the incident when informed. 8, implement a plan to ensure the safety, well-being, and support for the people of color and others in the job site who were directly impacted by the incident, and reassure them that there will be no further harm or retaliation or disruption to their work, reputation, and careers. 9, file a formal report with the Portland Police. The values of increasing diversity, equity, inclusion in our industry must lead us not only to speak out, but also to stand for justice and to take action. As stakeholders in the construction industry and our region, we recognize that we must take this moment to work together to put an end to systemic racism and sexism and create safer job sites. We invite collaboration to create workplaces that allow all workers dignity, safety, and performing their jobs without fear or harm. We also acknowledge that our organizations have made many of our own errors pertaining to diversity, equity, inclusion. We are equally invested in righting the wrongs that we have ignored in our own organizations. We understand that you may have already taken some of these steps. We promise to stand with you and support you in addressing the culture of racism and inequity in the construction industry, and will commit to working together for change. We have a tremendous amount of resources at our disposal that we are glad to share in terms of educational recommendation, as well as best practices developed for safer, discrimination-free job sites. The organizations listed below stand in support with us in signing on this letter and stand with you in working together to eradicate racism. While our industry has made changes for the better, we have a long way to go. The time to act is now, and we ask that you partner with us on this important journey. In solidarity, Kelly Kupchak, Executive Director of Oregon Tradeswomen, and Patricia Daniels, Executive Director of Constructing Hope. I'll end there. And I think I just wanted to give space for our committee members. I just want to recognize my own privilege in the space. Wanted to bring forth, I think, an important letter, an issue highlighted by our partners at Oregon Tradeswomen and Constructing Hope. And I think it's highlighting not just a problem in the construction industry, but I think we've heard other reports throughout the country. But I did want to take a step for folks if there were any questions or potential next steps that we could take as a committee. I thought it pertains to us in the sense that we are in the city of Portland. We are working to get folks in clean energy jobs, some of which are in the construction industry. I think it's important that we try to eradicate any work types of workplace harassment. And I acknowledge that for any person of color, especially a woman of color, to raise this creates a risk for that individual's future employment in this industry. So I think I just wanted to end that note, but I definitely want to create space for future leaders, especially folks at OTI and Constructing Hope, to speak on this further rather than just having me read this letter.
Michael?
I'm sure Jeffrey knows this too, but as you know, I'm a construction worker. I've been a construction worker for a long time, and this is not a one-off or an uncommon. This is a daily, weekly occurrence on construction sites, on every construction site. This is not a outlier. This is normalized in the industry. So I'm really glad this letter came out. A lot of us use things like violence to solve these problems on the construction site. But yeah, this is not an outlier. This is not a, I can't believe this happened. This is happens every day in this city on construction sites. It's nooses, it's Confederate flags, it's getting your toolbox filled with glue, it's getting your tires slashed on the job site. It takes all sorts of forms, but it is constant and pervasive in the construction industry, in Portland especially. Well, yeah, just pervasive.
Shanice?
Thank you, Ron Feast, for sharing this letter that these folks created. I think, Michael, what you articulated is much better than what I could come up with right now. But just thinking about the fact that people care about paying attention, but there's kind of other unresolved same situations that have been going on. And as we think about some of these comments that were brought up tonight too, what our role might be in thinking about this frame of white folks proving that they can do things, and or white folks being positioned to prove that they can work for people of color. And so just even processing this, and our role as a committee, especially sitting with the demands that those folks have asked, I think it's so critical to sit with that as we create and reinforce structures that are, quote unquote, supposed to be undoing, what this typically looks like. And so retaliation, there's some themes that are being called out there for us to sit with that are just everyday realities. And Black and Indigenous and people of color is this term we're using a lot in this work and right now. And just for us to kind of be thinking about just these nuances when incidents come up like this. There's something about anti-Blackness, there's something about colonization. And I think calling out how Black folks are protected in these spaces, and that impact for other people of color, for other folks who are being targeted in other ways. I think we have a role to think about policy and or retaliation, but this is for people of color. So how we build resilience and protect them through these structures, and make sure folks are held accountable if they're harmed. I think those are the things that are important. But yeah, as a Black woman kind of sitting with that, it's hard to be productive when you're processing your own pain. But I think we have a role to be, especially as we got some work to do, I would imagine, with our grant criteria, that this is a part of that.
Thanks, Shanice. Jeffrey?
Yeah, just as Michael said, this is not uncommon. It's very common in our industry. it's been this way for a very, very long time, and I think what's very important to state is actually by design in a lot of ways, especially in the construction industry. I would say it's more magnified in the construction industry than it is in our general society. Even in our general society, not doing a very good job of that, as you see in today's current events. So, you know, the biggest thing I see is that I hope that Anderson makes sure that the woman who did come forth, that they make sure that her job is not at jeopardy, and make sure that they specifically make sure that she's not being harassed, because that's typically what I see when people raise their hand and they whistleblowers, they tend to get harassed, especially in the construction industry. So I hope that Anderson does take the necessary steps to make sure that person is taken care of, and make sure that that she feels as if they really are supporting her in that space that she currently is in right now. Similar to what Shanice said, it is kind of hard to even speak on this because of my own personal pain with dealing with this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's for us as a committee, as the ex-committee members, and for PCEF, I would love for us to explore, you know, making sure that we put these kind of policies in place to make sure that something like this does happen. I think we should expect it to happen because of how ingrained it is in this culture. We should put policies in place to make sure that whoever is a part of our project knows that they will be protected by us, and that we do encourage people to speak out on any type of injustice. That's all I got.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Yes, this is Shannon. I would like to just add that I most definitely want to piggyback off the two others that just shared briefly. As they stated, this is something that has been going on in our communities for many of years, injustice. And the thing that I wanted to say is that most definitely, you know, racism and the stereotyping and injustice, disparities, all those things is, I mean, you know, it's just overwhelming for us. Constantly over and over again for generations after generations after generations after generations. The thing that saddens my heart is that when through this pandemic situation that's just happened, you know, you look up and you see how all of this money that's come down the pipeline to give to our communities of color. All this money that's been funneled through the pipeline to help for our communities of color because of the pandemic. And, you know, I asked myself, well, if the pandemic didn't come, well, would we have been given some money? You know, no, we were struggling. We've been struggling, but no money has come for our communities of color due to all this stuff, all the racism, all the stereotypes. Is always have to happen to our communities for the government, for the state, for local county government elected officials to be able to give us some money in our communities. But on the flip side of the coin, when there is money that comes down to the pipeline, you know, there's always a process. There's always things that make it complicated for us to be able to get the money. And one of the things, like as you guys were just saying, that we as the community, you know, when we're dealing with different racism, stereotyping, most definitely we want to be able to know that we as a community can stick together and be of support to allow our voices to be heard. As this young woman, again, you know, we want to make sure that she is protected. But then at the same time, there's a lot of us out here that has been protesting. There's a lot of us out here that has been doing all the different things too when it comes to George Floyd's situation. And I think to myself, how many of us are protected? How many of us are have been watched? How many of us have been, you know, have been approached because of the situation? So it's a continuously situation. But the thing that constantly concerns me is that every time something happens within our community, it's an award that comes for us. Let's give them some money so we can take care of them. But then when you have the different funders, they send the money to the different people to fund the different organizations so they can be able to send it out to the different families members and the different individuals so they can be served. It still becomes a complicated process. That's also a concern too for me, because it shouldn't even be that way. It shouldn't even be that way. It's still a complicated process. It's still an inequity process because everybody doesn't even get served. Everybody still doesn't get served equally.
Thank you, Shannon. Sam? You're leaning forward.
Thank you all. There's a lot that I know folks are going to need to hold on to, and it's important that we hold on to that. There's a good chunk of work ahead of us. So just want to, I know that a lot of folks have laid a lot out tonight, and know that continues to take its toll, and I'm sorry that it has to continue to take its toll. So I appreciate everyone that showed up tonight. Appreciate everyone that's provided comment tonight. We will be running and grabbing the rest of our comments tomorrow, and we got our work ahead of us. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday, and just want to hope you all get some rest, take care of yourselves, and catch you then.
Thank you, everyone. Nope. Robin, did you have something you wanted to say? Nope. Okay.
See y'all later.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, folks. Good night.
Good night.